Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, is with us every Thursday to offer her legal expertise by providing some general advice on the latest hot topics. Of course, having experience spanning more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law, she joins us now. Good morning, Despina.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Despina.
Good morning.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
This morning, a couple of interesting topics as usual. A little bit later on, we're going to talk about a settlement date. Now, on the program over previous weeks and previous months, we've talked about buying and selling property. But one of the most important aspects of that is the settlement date. We'll look at that very shortly. In the meantime, buying a business. Now, if you've ever bought a business or sold a business, there is so much involved. There are minefields all over the place, aren't there?
It can be very tricky. So I thought that I would let the listeners know of quite a few things about whether you're buying or selling a business that will affect you. And it's probably these things that I'm going to mention you won't even know about. So, and definitely you need advice. You need to be represented whether you're buying or selling a business because it's complex and there are a lot of balls to juggle that have to be managed through the whole process. So yeah, I thought we'd talk about that this morning and hopefully people can gain some greater knowledge. So when you're buying a business, what I'm going to be talking about predominantly is in Queensland. So typically the standard REIQ business sale contract is used. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people draft their own business sale agreements and that's fine, obviously to be checked first by your lawyer. But under the standard REIQ contract, there are a number of provisions that are deeming provisions. So what that means is that in certain standard terms of the contract, it states in various instances, which I'll explain, you are deemed to be satisfied about various items if you don't give notice by a particular date. And that can be scary. So I'm talking about things like the lease, okay? So every premises, if you're buying a business, the business is located inside a shop, premises, shopping centre, whatever it is, and there'll be a lease attached to the business. So you are allowed to vet the lease, have your lawyer look at it, review it, and advise if you're satisfied. Now, there's a time limit with that, which your lawyer should tell you, of course. And if you don't give notice by that due date, look, I'm satisfied, I'm not satisfied, if you just miss it entirely, you are deemed to be satisfied. Therefore, you can't raise any issues about that lease later on.
Right. So by deeming, they say, okay, well, you know this, or we believe you know this is the case, and you may not know anything about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've got the lease and then you've got the financials. Now, the financials with a business is one of the most important things. So a lot of people get those, when I quote unquote financials, and I'll explain that in a minute, prior to signing a contract. Sometimes the seller is quite open to, look, here's my financials, have a look. If you're interested, we can, negotiate a contract. So when we talk about financials for any business, but generally talking about profit and loss statements, balance sheets, tax returns, right? So those are and we want to look at 3 consecutive years at least. We don't just want to have figures for the last 12 months.
All fresh from COVID.
Exactly. So particularly last year's figures for any business is going to dip, right? So you want to have at least for the last 3 financial years. So there are, again, deeming provisions. If you don't notify by a particular date, right, that you are satisfied with the financials, you're deemed to be satisfied with the financials. So after that date, you're not allowed to raise any issues about those figures, which is important. So getting an accountant and a financial advisor up front early to look at the figures is really, really critical.
Yeah, wow. And obviously with a business, there are so many ins and outs, and you're not just dealing with financials, you're dealing with employers and licenses. So how does that fall under law? What can you do?
Yep, so employees is a big issue because when you buy a business, there's obviously staff. Okay, so the standard REIQ contract provides a number of provisions that apply, such as, okay, you can make an offer to all the employees to take them on or not. If you don't make an offer to some of the existing employees, the standard contract provides that you're responsible for redundancy payments as the buyer. Now, a lot of people aren't aware of that, so when I negotiate contracts, we sometimes or often cross that whole provision out, you see, because the whole idea of mentioning these standard provisions is They are standard terms in your REIQ, but you're open to negotiate and remove some of these standard terms so they don't apply. And that's why you need to get advice up front. So, yeah, employees is a big one. So the vendor is also responsible for those employees who just say, you know what, I don't want to accept this offer. I don't want to be employed by the new company. I'm going to leave. Okay, well, that's another situation. Then the seller's responsible. So it's understanding the difference between from the seller's liability and the buyer's liability with these employees. Really, really important. And at settlement time, under the standard terms, there is an adjustment made of 70-30. So what that means is, you know, if you have employees that go with the new owner, all of their entitlements have to go through. You don't just lose those entitlements generally.
Yeah.
So then the vendor and the buyer, they negotiate an adjustment so the buyer doesn't have to pay as much at settlement, right? Because they're receiving all these employees with all their entitlements. So it's a tricky area.
Yeah.
Employees. Other issues like stock. Are you buying a business on a walk-in, walk-out basis? Or are you buying it so you do a stock take? And if you do a stock take, it's done usually the night before settlement, and the parties agree on a figure.
Oh, does it have to be done 24 hours before?
Yes, because practically, or on the morning, but on the morning it's not practical because the business is open.
Of
so
course,
it depends on what type of business it is.
Yeah.
If it's a restaurant, might be hard to do a stock take, say at 6 p.m. when
Yeah.
it's, you know, prime
busy.
time.
Booming.
You might have to do it 11 or 12 o'clock midnight to do your stock take. So that's really important to negotiate that up front, and you can nominate a maximum amount for your stock take. So say if the stock was 20 grand, you could nominate in your contract up front, okay, well, I'm only going to purchase up to 5 grand or up to 10 grand. But that's all negotiated early. And the other thing with stamp duty, which everyone knows what stamp duty is about, if you are buying a business and you nominate up front, I'm going to pay for stock as well as your purchase price, right? You are paying duty on that as well. So if you have a purchase price of $100,000 for a business, okay, then you've got stamp duty on $100,000, which is at full investment rate in Queensland. And if you're having stock, you've got to pay for that stock. So it's consideration. So if the stock is $10,000, then you're paying stamp duty on $110,000, not $100,000. So those are the things you need to know up front when you budget for buying a business, particularly. And with restaurants is a classic one. We do so many restaurants and cafes. You've got to get a food license. You've got to get liquor licenses. So without having that in place at settlement, right, you really can't trade. Or you could, but you can't sell alcohol. Right, until you get your liquor license. And there are ways to apply for a long-term liquor license, but you can also apply for an interim liquor license, which is 2 days. You know, it takes to get this interim one through. So, but you have to settle first. So there's all lots of tricks and tips and things that you need to know. It's very difficult.
It sounds like a real minefield.
It is a minefield for a lot of different reasons.
And there are obviously some big costs involved, and it would be very easy to get caught to actually get the other side of the sale and open the doors, and suddenly you realise all of these things that were just missed.
Exactly.
You can see why that would be a big problem.
Exactly. And when you apply for, example, food licenses and liquor licenses, they take weeks and weeks. So you need to get in early for those. Another really interesting, important topic is restrictive covenants. So what does that mean? So if you are selling a business, maybe you want to open up a similar business somewhere else down the track. So each business contract has a provision about, okay, well, you're restricted or prohibited from opening up a similar business within a certain, distance
Radius
from
or
the
something.
restaurant, radius, exactly, and for a period of time. Now that's negotiated up front.
Wow. Why is that put in place to begin with?
Well, you can imagine if someone is selling their business to somebody else and there's a lot of goodwill they've generated and a lot of customer base, if they are allowed to just open up a business
Next
down the
door,
road,
yeah.
or even 5
Yeah.
kilometres is not far, 5 kilometres, we usually negotiate 25 kilometres or something like that, depending on
Of
where and what
course.
type of business. You can imagine they might just take all the business
All the
away.
customers, all the
That's
money.
right, because when
yeah.
you buy a business, you're paying for the business, you're paying for goodwill, you're paying for IP, right? So all of that is included. So really important to know about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously we spoke about restaurants. So are there any other businesses in particular that are harder to sell or buy?
No, they're all, whatever business it is, it's always going to be tricky and you need someone experienced to look after it. But particularly in the restaurant business, there's always extras to do because you've got to get that food license and you've got to get that liquor license. So, those ones take a bit longer than others. But yeah, hopefully that's helped the listeners understand that buying and selling businesses, whether you're the seller or you're the buyer, can be tricky. And a minefield, like you said, because of the terms under the standard REIQ. And even if you don't have that contract, you do another contract, you prepare it, it's got similar provisions anyway.
How long should you get, how long before you actually decide on opening a business or buying a business, how long before that should you go and see your lawyer?
You should, as soon as you're interested in looking at a business, you need to see a lawyer straight away and say, look, this is what I'm interested in. Can you give me some general guidance up front to help me negotiate? Because that's quite important. So, yeah, as early as you can. Yeah, getting in early is the key.
This is Radio 97, talking law with Despina Priala on a Thursday morning. If you have a question to do with the law and you'd like Despina to answer it, all you need to do is pop it into an email, send it to breakfast@radio97.com.au. And Despina, in the next few weeks, we're going to have a Q&A session.
Yes, we are. I thought that would be great for the listeners to be involved, and we're going to give people the opportunity to send in questions, and we'll have a whole segment dedicated to a Q&A when you can ask any question you like, and we'll try and do our best to answer it.
Fantastic stuff. You can text your questions to 0400141269 or email us on breakfast@radio97.com.au. Stay tuned. Coming up, we're talking about the most important day, Settlement Day, and the many things that can unfortunately go wrong. Stay tuned.